ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi News Daily listeners, just stopping by quickly to let you know about my new pod.
One of Australia's most baffling missing persons cases.
In 2007, 4 people vanished.
The family lived a bizarre alternative lifestyle.
It was dubbed a death cult, but after months of investigation, I don't think this story can be condensed into that simple headline. I'm Dominique Bayens, host of Expanse, the Nan-Up 4. Binge all episodes now. Search for Expanse on ABC Listen and iView.
Donald Trump went into the war with Iran thinking it would be over quickly. Now, more than 7 weeks later, with a ceasefire about to end, there's still no obvious off-ramp, with uncertainty surrounding a second round of peace talks in Pakistan. Today, a former Iran negotiator in the Trump administration, Nate Swanson, on what the US president needs to do to end the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Nate, we first spoke to you at the start of the war in Iran on day one. That was more than 50 days ago now. So has it been going as you would have predicted?
In some respects, yes, but in most respects, no. I mean, I think it was not totally surprising that Iran escalated so quickly based on the scope and size of the initial U.S. and Israeli attack. But never, I think, would I ever have guessed that it would go this long and that it would be still so messy 50 days in without a clear idea of how exactly this ends and really still even at this point what the objective is.
Now, up until July last year, you were on Trump's Iran negotiating team. So just tell me, back then, were you articulating what the risks of going into this war would be? And was he listening?
Well, I'm a career civil servant across multiple administrations, and as you noted with the Iran team at the end, I do not have a personal relationship with President Trump by any measure. Never briefed him, unlike other presidents. But to his team, you know, when I was still there, I think they were genuinely interested in diplomacy. But obviously there was a willingness to use force that was kind of unique from other administrations. You know, I think in his first term, you know, he did the strike that killed Qasem Soleimani. And then, you know, before I left, there was the Midnight Hammer operation that, you know, we did in connection with the Israelis. So, I mean, Trump was clearly more comfortable using force than other U.S. presidents. And I think, yeah, he didn't really fully understand the risks associated and how a conflict could go bad so quickly. And so that is kind of unique to the president. And I think, you know, he has a very, very small inner circle. And I think they were all fairly confident this would be easy, which was a mistake.
All right, well, a 2-week ceasefire has been in place, but the Strait of Hormuz has been an ongoing problem. And, I mean, events have hardly been peaceful, have they, with the US attacking an Iranian cargo ship?
A nighttime mission in the Arabian Sea. US Marines boarding an Iranian-flagged cargo ship after its engine room was fired upon.
Vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
Did you predict any of this in relation to the Strait of Hormuz that has become such a massive problem for the entire world?
Yes and no. I mean, I thought Iran would lash out the Gulf and try to shut down the strait. I think what surprised me was really at the first outset is that Iran was able to get, you know, their own exports out for really up until the last 2 weeks. You know, so for the first 6 weeks of the war, they basically kept, you know, traffic from the Gulf out, but, you know, their own exports of oil to China were still basically happening. So I mean, to me, that was quite shocking and was quite significant. And I think also, you know, the strait has always been this theoretical threat that, you know, the U.S. and others have been worried about, but it was never a practical reality. And Iran made it a reality, you know, almost instantly in the first, you know, 24 to 48 hours. And I think it's really proving to be in many ways, much more effective than any of the other means of deterrence. It's quite a bit more effective than the proxies. It's quite a bit more effective than their nuclear program, and really even their missile program to some extent. So, I mean, it's really been a huge boon for Iran to be able to utilize this power, this new power, in ways that are really quite unforeseen and quite effective. So I think it's going to have long-lasting implications, unfortunately.
And because of that Strait of Hormuz and Iran's seemingly upper hand in it, it considers that it's winning this war.
Yeah, I think there's certainly quite a few within the Iranian administration who believe they're winning the war. And I think there's definitely some merit to it, right? I mean, it's different than the U.S. or a Western definition of winning, right? They don't need to defeat the U.S. or defeat Israel militarily. They just need to survive. And they're fighting an asymmetric war. So every day that goes on that the Iranian regime holds, that the Islamic Republic is still the face of the country, that's victory. And so they've done that, and they've shown that that there's no immediate fall coming, and in some ways they're stronger than they were. So yeah, I think that defines them in victory, and I think they also are, emboldened by the Strait as this new security guarantee that they really have lacked since Hezbollah was, so thoroughly defeated in 2024. So it's a new thing, and you can understand why Iran feels that way. But at the same time, they have been pummeled militarily. I don't think there's any point in denying that. I can't remember what the total number of strikes between U.S. and Israel were. But, it's like well over, I think, 15 or 25,000 strikes. I mean, so it is, this long-lasting damage that Iran has suffered. But, kind of paradoxically, they've been hit so hard militarily, been pummeled militarily, but they've, reestablished deterrence. So you can understand why some in Iran feel like they've won so far.
All right. Well, Donald Trump, of course, Nate, has been acting erratically. He keeps switching from saying a deal is possible, negotiations are underway, to then saying he's going to blow up every bridge and power plant in Iran. And now, of course, again, there's these conflicting messages about this latest round of peace talks in Pakistan. What do you make of all of that?
Well, the president is unique. I can't say that this is typical U.S. president behavior in terms of how they act. The implications of it on Iran are unclear. I think they don't know how to react to this. I think they ultimately feel, though, that it's a sign of weakness on the U.S. side. If you take the day that he threatened to wipe out, civilization, that very same day, then, Iran basically didn't change their position, and the president announced a peace deal by the end of the day. So from their perspective, they did nothing. Trump basically folded and basically agreed to Iran's framework for talks. It reinforces their own strategy. And so, and that's to their advantage, I think.
Yeah, and Iran says it doesn't trust Trump. It sees these peace talks, it's reported, as a way to make it surrender. And the two sides, they're so far apart, right, when it comes to a lasting peace deal and the conditions of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Iran's not going to surrender or capitulate. I mean, that much has been made clear through the history of U.S.-Iran relations, but really even just this, 18 months or so of Trump's administration. The entire premise has been that, the U.S. is the dominant military power, has all the leverage, Iran should capitulate, and they haven't. And they didn't before the war, they haven't during the war, and they're not going to at the peace talks now. And so I don't think you're going to ever see in the near future Iran, negotiating away the Islamic Republic. But I don't think that's what these talks in Islamabad are about. I think it's a much, much narrower scope. And I do think it is in the interest of both parties to end the war, to de-escalate, and maybe find some, mutual ground here. So I think that is possible. But it's not going to change who Iran is.
Well, just on a side note, Nate, and interestingly, Trump had said that JD Vance wouldn't be attending these talks in Pakistan, but then Iran seemed to demand that he had to be there or they wouldn't be there. What do you make of this role that JD Vance is playing at the moment?
Well, two things on that. So the first is just there's a lot of posturing going on both sides about will they be there, won't they be there? And I think that's mostly noise. For the most part, it's just trying to get the strongest position going into talks. For JD Vance's role, I think Iran doesn't trust, Witkoff and Witkoff in particular, but Witkoff and Kushner in tandem. Twice now Iran has been negotiating with Witkoff, and a war started, or attack started. So for them, I think they perceive Vance to be less supportive of this war, which I think is probably accurate, and it has a lot of U.S. media reporting that, and more motivated to end this, because this does not fit with the ideology that he espoused, which is kind of an America first, no, silly wars abroad. So I do think JD Vance is uniquely positioned within the administration to want this to end. I think Iran recognizes that, and I think it's also a reflection that they just don't trust Witkoff anymore.
Well, Nate, what's your assessment? Do both parties want an off-ramp at this point? And is there actually an off-ramp that can be offered up?
Yeah, my baseline assessment is that it is in the interest of both parties to end this war. And so I think they should be able to figure it out. There are a couple options for that. I think Iran's perspective, I think they care about three things. I think they care about not getting attacked every 6 months or so. And I think by establishing the Strait of Hormuz as a deterrent, as a security guarantee, I think they've actually ensured that outcome. So I think that was really important. I think second, Iran wants to monetize the Strait of Hormuz. And I think the third thing that they just kind of in the last few weeks decided they care about is Lebanon. So they basically made those their three key demands. In the U.S., I think our primary goal, which is to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And so, of course, the strait was open at the beginning of the war. So that's, kind of makes you question what the objectives were. But I do think that is our top objective now. Now, that is a political problem for the president. If the only thing you achieve out of a war for 50 days that's caused a major crisis from the global economy is to say, hey, we ended the war in basically the same spot we started. So I think as a result of that, he wants something different that can help him create this narrative that he's accomplished something. So part of that is, degrading Iran's military. But now I think he's trying to achieve something on the nuclear front. He wants a suspension of Iran's enrichment program, and he wants to deal with the highly enriched uranium that's in Iran. So I think Iran's preference would probably be to not deal with the nuclear program, but I think they're open to dealing with it if they can get more in return. And so I think this is where you see the haggling over the frozen assets, potential sanctions relief, things of that sort. So I do think there is a landing zone ultimately for this. But for me, the president should be judged not on necessarily what he gets, but, hopefully on not overpaying. If we end up with a situation where Iran has basically a toll booth running through the Strait of Hormuz, that's a huge strategic loss for the U.S. and for the world. So I think, we really don't want that to happen. And so that, I think he should be careful about what he's trading away to make sure it looks different. But time is running out for both sides. So neither side can do this indefinitely. And so I think Iran's calculus is that he'll blink first, but you never know.
So just tell me, Nate, do you think that we could actually be close to the end of this war, or is there a chance that it could still escalate? Donald Trump has never ruled out sending troops in.
I think both are possibilities. The problem with sending troops in is it really doesn't change the it's problematic on multiple levels. But the biggest problem is it doesn't really change Iran's calculus. Iran will just respond in kind by, hitting Gulf energy, hitting more tankers in the Strait or in the Persian Gulf. So that doesn't really change anything. There's no military objective. The only thing that really changes Iran's calculus is massive ground troops, like Iraq 2003. But that's incredibly unwise, and I don't think the president will do that. Now, look, are we going to have a deal by Wednesday evening in Islamabad? I'm skeptical. I think there's still, it seems like there's still pretty significant differences and gaps. But I do think you could have something close to a framework, and if needed, a extension on the ceasefire as well, as shaky and rocky as that ceasefire is.
Nate Swanson is a former Iran negotiator in the Trump administration and a former director for Iran at the National Security Council during the Biden presidency. He is now a resident senior fellow and director of the Iran Strategy Project at the Atlantic Council. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed, Audio production by Sam Dunn. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.